Good evening, welcome to All About Auckland. I'm Kane Glass. This week we're at the city fringe town centre of Ormiston. Behind me is Ormiston Senior College, capable of handling 2,000 students. Manukau Council planned to build a town centre here 10 years ago. Facilities were to include a library and a pool. Then the GFC hit and their development partner went bust. So the houses are going up with no amenities. In this week's show, the Mayor reads his draft budget for the 2015 year, and the Independent Advisory Board on Transport Funding delivers its final report. But first, the Independent Hearings Panel on the Unitary Plan gets underway. The panel's hearing submissions on the provisions of the Regional Policy Statement, which is the base of the planning pyramid.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the hearing. Topic 5, RPS issues. I'd like to welcome you all. Our focus today, tomorrow and on Friday is on getting the information from submitters in relation to this topic being the issues at the very top of the tree in the Regional Policy Statement. And we're starting this morning with the Auckland Council, which has allocated 40 minutes to present us with an overview of its approach to the Unitary Plan and its approach to the issues in the RPS.
It's an honour to appear at a significant milestone in the progress of the proposed Auckland Unitary Plan. I appear here with my colleagues Mr Hassel and Ms Fazenkloot, and you will be later be hearing from a range of our external legal providers in relation to the RPS issues, beginning with Ms Caldwell. As set out in the introduction to the submissions, this is a milestone event in a long-running milestone process for Auckland Council. That began, of course, with the amalgamation, creating Auckland Council in 2010.
The RPS issues have been drafted at a deliberately high level, and they address the regionally significant issues. They don't purport to address every single resource management issue in the region. So there's been a threshold approach taken. The Auckland Plan has also been an important contextual factor for the preparation of the issues. The Auckland Plan, the spatial plan which the Council was required to prepare upon amalgamation, is a matter to which the Council must have regard as a strategy or plan prepared under other legislation, under section 61.2, but perhaps more importantly it's a matter that you as a panel must take account of in making your recommendations on this process to the Council.
We deliver homes and communities for people to live in for literally thousands and shortly tens of thousands of Aucklanders. I believe that we do this well, but I do find it frustrating knowing that we could do significantly better if we didn't have to spend so much time, people hours and money on interpreting planning provisions at the consenting or plan change level. And I think to continue to do this would be to the detriment of everybody. Given this, I think my opinion is that the Unitary Plan has to reflect what is important to Auckland now and for the foreseeable future. This means growing up as a city and embracing the benefits of growth and seeking to maximise these benefits, recognising that the inefficient provision of housing disenables societal wellbeing, as well as having significant economic benefits. We need to recognise that contestable or interpretive failing to exercise their structured planning or consenting stages significantly contribute to this inefficiency and should be minimised if not prevented. We need to ensure that the current practice of not allowing the cumulative loss of housing opportunity to be given weight when balanced against individual gullies or with the road corridors and specific designs. We also, I think, need to explicitly acknowledge that the preservation of individual natural heritage features, etc., depends on the importance of those features and in their context, for example, whether they're inside or outside the road. And I believe that these matters are best addressed at the regional level by appropriate framing of the issues in the first instance. My evidence also traverses the importance of housing in economic terms to Auckland. It simply swamps any other investment sector by a fair margin. And the other point I'd like to note there is that relatively small changes can have relatively large impacts. And for example, if a footpath is widened by 300 mils, 30 centimetres, in terms of having a visual impact over 10 years, that equates to approximately 750 lots. or in other terms, approximately $55 million of lost wealth for the city, or 75 hectares of land elsewhere that needs to accommodate those houses, if we're looking at 50,000 standalone houses over a 10-year period, as the Auckland plan does. And by the time you factor in apartments and all the other factors, terrace houses, etc., I think it's relatively clear that relatively small impacts at an individual stage have massive cumulative impacts. And in this respect, the economic development issue, to my mind, to a greater or lesser degree, appears to be preoccupied with ensuring infrastructure and business land are provided, without acknowledging that without population and residential growth, there'd be significantly reduced need for both those services. And I don't think the addition of a further single dot point by Mr. Mackey still falls well short of being appropriate in actually addressing the issue in an appropriate manner. Despite other comments to the contrary, I believe that large parts of our language within the issues in the regional policy statement are as elitist. There is consistent reference to protection of features without qualification or recognition of context, and the same standard applies within or without the rub. I note a couple of those examples in my evidence, but there are many more. For example, one of our challenges apparently is to ensure we protect our historic heritage from inappropriate use. Maintaining Indigenous biodiversity requires us to protect existing habitats and enhance ecosystems. Development must optimise benefits of transport. They're all fairly absolutist terms, and I think fairly unequivocal in terms of how they should be interpreted. I think all of you, if not most of you, if not all of you, would have been through experiences where massive applications have been lodged, heaps of detailed assessment been lodged with council. It's been reviewed by various sort of subspecialists and silos. Requests for further information have come back. You've responded to those. You've had meetings to discuss those. 13 or 14 of people have turned out from Auckland Transport, and sort of 6 or 8 months later, consent spits out it's a compromised position that nobody is really happy with, and that's sort of the situation that I think is indicative of poor practice, and one which I think could be averted through an appropriate phrasing of the issues. The other point I'd like to make is that I think that the Unitary plan needs to be for Auckland today. These are unprecedented times in both New Zealand and Auckland. There is massive growth here. The benefits of this need to be harnessed. Central government has already stepped in, passing specific legislation, reorganising the city and overriding usual planning processes. There is soaring house price escalation and unaffordability, and further legislation change is highly likely.
How do you want to proceed?
Simply to explain a little bit why I see that as being important as a planner. The experience we've had from Christchurch in particular is that these issues aren't always considered at the right time, and that it is helpful and balance and recognising that natural hazards are a cross-cutting issue across most of these areas, and given the additional material that's been put in matters to consider and other lists, that it would be an appropriate inclusion to ensure information about natural hazards is considered when thinking about economic resilience, when thinking about urban growth. It's relevant in the rural environment as much as the coastal environment. I think it's a consistent approach across issues to include these references.
Nevertheless, and surprisingly, POL has been criticised for the approach it has adopted in the legal submissions by counsel of the Auckland Council, provided in relation to issue B16. That criticism is rejected. It is an unjustified attack on the integrity of POL's participation in the Unitary Plan process. That is the reference to POL's attempt to forestall later debate. It is quite inappropriate that Council responded to POL's case in this manner. The Council itself has sought, when it suits it, to frame the various debates to come on the contested lower order provisions of the Unitary Plan by its own approach to the submissions made on B1 issues. Put simply, those submissions of B1 issues that are consistent with the Council's position on the lower order provisions of the Unitary Plan have been routinely accepted by the Council, while those submissions that are not consistent with the Council's position have been routinely rejected. POL works hard to get the most out of its existing asset base in order to delay the capital and other costs of expansion, and has made significant efficiency gains over the last few years, And one of the most extraordinary things, I hope you've read that instance occurred, that Harbour City, among others, seems to think the port is just desperate to get out there and reclaim land. I mean, if you had any idea of the cost of doing that, when you don't need to, I mean, it's the most self-restricting concept because it's so expensive. So you always use your asset as much as you can, and you only expand your footprint if you have to. And he covers that for you in some depth.
Big cuts in the 2015 budget had already been signalled before the Mayor delivered his announcement on Thursday. And prior to this, the 21 local boards had written the Mayor a letter expressing no confidence in his budget because of cuts in the local board funding. And then on Thursday, we heard that town centres were not going to get any more funds for development. So town centres like this one, where will they be?
In developing our first LTP, which we prepared in late 2011 and early 2012, we have major challenges to face, not the least of which was to bring together 8 differential rating systems from the legacy councils and create one harmonised approach to rating. Inevitably, this brought about significant change across the city, and we've spent the last 3 years transitioning most of our ratepayers to the amalgamated system. The 2 key issues in the rating system they have to grapple with are the business differential and the level of the UAGC. Business differentials are significantly different in each of the legacy councils, ranging from no differential to 5.85. The approach we decided to adopt was to take the same amount of rates from the business community in total and calculated the differential to achieve this. It became a differential, therefore, of 2.63. We also agreed that over time the differential should be reduced to 1.63 and that we would do this over 10 years. The subject of UAGC was one of the great debates with a wide range of views around the council table on what the appropriate level should be. At that time, Watercare were also introducing volumetrics, wastewater charges across the region. While these were in effect in some parts of Auckland, the majority were paying for wastewater through their rates. In making my proposal at the level of UAGC, this was uppermost in my mind. The models back then showed the slightly less ratepayers had significant change under the 450 UAGC than 350, which was the level I proposed and was eventually supported by the majority of the governing body. However, when I looked at where the impacts of the new wastewater charges fell, my view was that overall 350 was the fairest option when considering the combined impact of both. The revaluation of property across Auckland has delivered unprecedented movements in a 3-year period. These movements are widely different in the various parts of Auckland and create another difficult set of decisions for us in adopting any changes in our rating policy. Business differential. The revaluation has overall had a much less significant impact on the business sector than the non-business sector. Without some form of adjustment, the redistribution of rates caused by the revaluations will result in the business sector paying 8% less rates and the residential sector paying 5% more. I'm still committed to reducing the business differential over time, but cannot justify that significant shift in 1 year. I'm proposing that we reset the way we approach calculating the business differential in our policy by basing it on the proportion of our total rating revenue. So rather than a differential, a proportional approach. The same approach that we used as a starting point 3 years ago. I'm also proposing that we pause in reducing that proportion for 1 year only to help mitigate some of the impacts of the revaluation. This will mean that business sector will pay the same proportion of rates in 2015-16 as it does in the current year, and it removes the effect of the uneven changes in the revaluation between business and residential. This approach will also stabilise future revaluation changes. I'm also proposing that we continue to reduce the proportion of rates that the business sector contribute, but at a slower rate than originally proposed, i.e. over a further 10-year period. So in effect, we start anew over the next 10 years. The business sector will now reach a proportion of 25.8 of the total rates revenue in 2025-26, currently 33.3. This slower track will help ease the burden on those ratepayers in the residential sector that have been most adversely affected by the revaluation. Farms and lifestyle differentials. The principle of having differentials to decrease rates that apply to rural residential, rural business and farms and lifestyle properties, recognising their distance from many services, is in my view appropriate. So on the 5th and 6th of November we'll be making all the key decisions for the draft LTP 15 to 25, including the rating policy.
I think given the valuations, the revaluations that we've seen and the impact, as you've highlighted in this document and others, one way that we can ease the pain for many is through that higher UAGC. It's long overdue. It's something that we've been calling for, some of us, for 4 years. We've had 4 amendments over the last 4 financial years and lost every one. But I'm certainly getting the feeling that the time for a higher, albeit moderate, UAGC has come.
I would like to signal my intention to support a lift in the UAGC as well, and we'll welcome the debate next week.
I find that your desire to table your policy, is it a possibility for us as an individual councillors to table our policy today? Would you entertain such an amendment that you would accept?
No, look, it's quite clear, and it's part of the agenda as set. It's mine are proposed exactly the same as any part of the LTP.
Well, Mr. Chairman, for those of us who have not been overseas and have been trying to work through the many budgetary processes and LTP workshops, there is a measure...
Oh, Councillor Chris, stop. You are much better than this. You don't have to say that, all right? Now, just keep focused on your submission.
Mr. Chairman, I'm very focused on this.
Keep the discussion at an appropriate level.
I think she's talking about me.
Mr. Chairman, I am very conscious of this beautiful place that we are in and the respect that is deserved. But I am conscious of the people who also require that same level of respect. And I find this a very unusual process. I think that there should have been some warning that this was going to be your intention today, because there has been a willingness for some, you might find it entertaining, but I don't. We have waited for a long time. This is the only tool in the toolbox that we can actually apply to ensure equity across the region. We've seen our communities I think, with considerable stress with the possibility of rating increases associated with revaluations. Now, for most of us sitting around here, we have a genuine concern around affordability for low-income ratepayers, and I'm pleased that your proposal highlights the opportunity that there is for support for those low-income ratepayers. And that support, quite rightly, is sheeted back to central government, because a rating which is really just a tax on property does not, as we have often debated, necessarily reflect the income of the individual. And I think as we move into this in greater detail, you are going to see middle-class Aucklanders being challenged to the point that many of them will actually have to leave Auckland. And so to table a proposal today and not allow for any movement or opportunity for other councillors to put forward other proposals, I think does not do justice to what the public expect from us. And if I was being cynical, I would say that it's a little bit like on this windy day here on the Oraki Marae, putting our finger up in the wind and seeing how the media are going to report it. So you've got a bit of wriggle room between now and when decisions are made.
Councillor Chris, stop. Look, That's just ridiculous. Do you mind?
I think, Mr Mayor, this is, there's a lot of room for frustration in this. It is a tough, hard, gnarly discussion that whether it goes back to our old councils and some of these debates that we had every year, we're trying to grapple with a new way of doing it, the mayoral proposal and where that fits into it. I don't think we've got a smooth process yet.
I also think it's very important, and I said at the workshop, that we don't jerk the levers that we have to change the rating base too much. That we don't just jump one hot stone to another. That we do in fact consider minimising the radicalness of some of the changes, but also stick to the principles that were established in the first term, because that's what people have based their business practices on, their lifestyles on, their levels of debt and so forth. And I support Councillor Wood's suggestion that we do look at approaching the government for an extension of that transition rating of the 10% maximum, because that did create a great degree of fairness. I look forward to the debate next week.
When we discuss the annual plan, Councillor Brewer and I were very keen to discuss the UAGC at that stage, and we were shut down there. Here we're being shut down. This is twice now we've been shut down.
So we get the trifecta next week. Stop. Mr. Mayor, I a press release.
But I think there was an expectation that this was the day we would discuss the rating policy, but we know that that's not happening in the next couple of weeks, and of course then the whole LTP was adopted or not, whatever, on the 19th of December.
I would agree with Councillor Brewer that I can't quite understand why we want to change the methodology of using the percentage ratio for the business differential. I hope we certainly lining up with Councillor Brewer on that. I'm open for a pause of 1 year, but again I prefer that we just look at maybe moving the timeline out for a double limit from 7 years to 14 years, and the pause if that's what the majority wants. There has been comment about an unequal process, and I think that's a lot of that's been about the process today, of today's meeting. I found the process of preparing for this whole thing very challenging. It's different. I know the legislation gives the Mayor's Office certain powers to propose. So I found that quite challenging to deal with. It's like something's been put up and then we just go through confidential workshops and we seem to be getting a lot of presentations with not too much chance to debate, and then we get another presentation which refines it, which is fine, but I just wonder if during that time that people have been listened to, because it's been unprecedented that 21 local boards have signed a piece of paper, a letter, condemning the process, united in their stance on many things. So I was sitting on the next few days that I am going to wanting us to re-look at some of our large transport projects. I would like us to be looking at the CRL timetable. I would like to be looking at the budgets where we signal that we push that back. We do the enabling work, notice of requirements, do what we have to do in the next few years in the precinct properties area, but otherwise realign our budgets. I'd like to have a serious debate that we realign our budgets to the national government's proposal, assisting Auckland in this way. And I say that because the Mayoral's proposal at the moment of 2.5% of the way it's structured is we are gutting the suburban town centres. There is virtually nothing happening in town centres. I can use examples my way, and I've been waiting for decades. Avondale's been waiting for 30 years. 30 years. And Mr Mayor, you've been up there twice in the last few months and telling them they're going to get this and that, community centre and library, yet the proposal has absolutely nothing in the budget, and it's spatial priority number 2. So I think we really need to be looking very seriously at the local budgets in the suburban areas.
The Independent Advisory Board on Transport Funding delivered its final report this week.
We know that the amount of rates that we have to spend and the taxes from the government will not give us the full integrated transport system and the transport upgrade that Aucklanders have been asking for decades. So over the last 3 years, we have tasked a group of people, and in particular in this term, the Independent Advisory Board, chaired by Stuart Millman and also advised by Peter Winder, to come up with 2 options which would assist us as an alternative funding stream for rates and taxes to give the transportation fix that Aucklanders have so desperately been asking for.
I'm pleased to publicly launch 2 pathways, which is what we're calling our report from our independent advisory body, or IAB. The council set up the IAB earlier this year to recommend 2 transport funding options or pathways for council's consideration prior to inclusion in the long-term plan. If I go back a bit, the Consensus Building Group, the CBG, was established by the council back in 2012, and on that group we investigated the size of the funding gap between what is needed to implement the Auckland plan and what revenue can be expected under current funding arrangements. So the CBG back then explored a whole range of options for sourcing this additional funding. And CBG concluded that while the $12 billion gap over the life of the 30-year Auckland plan could be filled with increases to the existing funding sources of property rates and fuel taxes, consideration should be given to introducing a charging regime for road use. And so to assist the council with this decision, the IAB was set up to recommend the 2 pathways. One, to be based on the existing tools or methods of collecting funding, and the other one to work through the different options and come up with a new road charging pathway. To achieve the Auckland planned transport network, we estimate that the quantum of additional funding required is around $300 million per annum in current dollars.
We are being recommended by the IAB 2 suggestions for the community. One, rating and petrol tax, and that's clearly the easiest, certainly the simplest to implement. But the other one is a network charge, which more complicated, more expensive to implement, but it has with it the potential of 2 real benefits. One, it would help to raise the funds that we need to genuinely invest, and secondly, a consequence of it would be that it would moderate transport behaviour, and particularly on the roads. People would make choices. Would they go and pay? Would they go earlier or later and not pay? Would they get on a bike? Or secondly, take public transport, as Stuart has indicated, and which we are increasingly seeing.
Thanks for watching the All About Auckland show. I hope you found the ideas stimulating. To watch the show again or to sign up for our newsletter, go to www.allaboutauckland.com. You can follow us on Facebook or via our Twitter handle, AllAboutAKL. Next week we're going to be looking more deeply at the Mayor's budget. See you then.